Hello everyone, we are back. Happy holidays, and we have just got back from the, premiere of Rogue One.
We did the Thursday night 7 o'clock screening just down the road in Silver Spring, and
this is a newcomer piano. She's probably going to be joining us, but anyway, this film.
First, before we do that, spoiler warning.
There are going to be spoilers.
And we're talking about the little nitty-gritty details here. We're not talking about, oh, they get the plans.
They get the plans.
Which is the ultimate spoiler. But
right.
You know what, we're not...
It's like when Revenge of the Sith came out. Spoiler alert, Anakin becomes Darth Vader.
So, yeah, but no, we're talking about the actual nitty-gritty details right here with this movie, and what a movie.
Oh my god.
I think that we had something in our minds of what we might have expected was going to be happening with this film.
You know, there have been 6 Star Wars movies in my lifetime. First one, Return of the Jedi, I was only 1 when it came out, or maybe not even 1 yet. Prequel trilogy, you know, you can say what you want about them. First 2 are, you know, hit and miss for me. Third one, I was so psyched over that one when it came out. Yeah, that was a big experience for me. The Force Awakens last year, of course, one of the most anticipated films of all time, but a very divisive movie. It's like half the fan base says that they loved it, and it's the other half says, oh, it sucks, it's worse than the prequels, blah, 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 blah.
Jar Jar Abrams and all that shit.
Blah, 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 blah. We're not going to talk about that.
Nope, we're not doing that tonight.
This movie, I think, has been the first one I've seen where by the end I was close to tears.
I'm not going to go that far with that, but that's not an indictment against this movie. This is a fantastic film. I think that we wondered what these spin-off movies, these anthology movies, if you will. Excuse me.
And I find it hilarious that, you know, throughout the production of this film, there were certain people that were just, you know, inclined to hate it because, oh, Gareth Edwards is doing it, or because they didn't like Godzilla or whatever, or, oh, they had to do reshoots, that's going to ruin the whole film.
I mean,
blah, 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 blah.
I mean, all throughout the spring and summer, we had to hear about how these reshoots we're going to change it and make it a more Disney-fied movie. Guys, let me tell you something. This is hardly a Disney-fied movie, if you even want to use that term. And I hate that term because what it basically is that it denigrates a certain style of filmmaking, which is a perfectly valid style of filmmaking, especially when it comes to animated movies. But this is hardly a Disney-fied movie. This is... I mean, the easiest thing that people could probably compare it to is perhaps maybe a less bloody version of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
I mean, there are moments in there where it just feels it feels like a war movie.
Definitely the third act. Oh my god.
I mean, okay, let's not jump ahead too much on this. You know, let's try to take it. You know, we start off with the beginning. We get kind of a little crash course. We meet a few of our, you know, key characters. Jyn Erso.
You know, a lot of people have been harping, you know, oh, they're just doing another female lead like Rey, and she's going to be awful. Felicity Jones was awful, blah, 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 blah. Jyn Erso is nothing like Rey, except that they're both British.
No, and Jyn Erso, I mean, this is another very interesting Star Wars female, I would say.
And when I say she's nothing like Rey, you know, the biggest complaint people like to hurl at Rey is the alleged she's a Mary Sue. Jyn is no Mary Sue.
Not even close.
Everything she's capable of doing, it's because of how she's been brought up, what she's gone through. This is the dark times of Star Wars. Of course she would have some skills with firearms and piloting and stuff like that. She is hardened, and she needs to be hardened.
Absolutely. It's just, you don't... the people that always love to bandy about that Mary Sue line, I just feel as though that, I mean, in regards to Rey, okay, here's my first piece of advice. why don't you wait until episode 8 comes out before you start making that?
Yeah, it's only the first of 3 movies that won.
Which I should point out, I was actually a little disappointed that we didn't get an episode 8 teaser with this movie.
Well, they would have announced that. You know they would have.
Yeah, maybe.
They would have made a big production out of it. And
still, it would have been a nice little surprise if they could have slid that in under the radar. I mean, who knows? It's just my opinion. But, no, I mean, Jin Erso, just another great character. Then we have the person that she winds up tagging along with.
Cassian. What was his last name?
Cassian Ono, maybe?
Something like Cassian that. Something.
Yeah, that's one thing that we both agree with. These names are really
hard to memorize the first time around. You know, I didn't do a whole lot of heavy-duty researching on this film like I did for The Force Awakens. I wanted to go into this one very fresh. So, you know, like, Jin Erso was about the only name I had memorized going into this.
Right, because, well, you know, let's face it, Felicity Jones is a high-profile actress, so that probably has something to do with it. Now, but Cassian, you know, he's a rebel spy who's basically doing black ops for the rebellion. Basically, these under the radar, these basically unauthorized, all but unauthorized, like almost 007 in a way, like say 00 license to kill type of things, and we see that very early on when when his informant can't escape. What does he do? He just shoots him dead. It just gives you the feeling that this is a guy that's. It's the fact that it's the means justify the end in his mind.
Especially in such hard times. And of course, there's our probably a big show stealer, our Jar Jar done right, K2SO, voiced by Alan Tudyk. Oh my God, this character!
This guy has an uncanny ability to steal scenes and.
In a good way.
In a good way, yes. and
he has such a dry, sarcastic wit and is always speaking what's on his mind, and it's done to hilarious effect.
Not like the I guess you could call it the Alan Rickman droid in season 2 in an earlier episode of Rebels this year. But
Alan Rickman droid.
It was a droid that had a voice that was very similar to Alan.
You mean like the Death Star droid?
I think so. I think so. That's probably the easiest way to think about it. But it was. But moving on from that, we've also got another couple of great characters. Chirrut Imwe, played by Donnie Yen, a bit of a famous kung fu actor, getting his opportunity to step in. And Guardian of the Wills, I think, is what they said.
Him and his partner, yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Or something about the Wills, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice little shout-out, of course, once again.
This is the first time I think the Wills has ever been spoken of in a live-action film.
There you go. I mean, that's another. That's one thing that I think that we need to just stop as a collective. Is us basically saying that they want to erase what Lucas has done. No. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do that.
I mean. There is prequel stuff in here. We've got the return of Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa, and we've got Mon Mothma, played by an actress who was cast to play her in Revenge of the Sith, though sadly her scenes were cut out in the final version. That was tragic to see, but now she gets a chance to really be young Mon Mothma, or I guess regular age Mon Mothma by this point.
By this point, yeah. I mean, and it's actually a surprise, but at the same time, it's a really good portrayal of her. And here's another thing that I think that was also a very interesting element to this is how divided the rebellion is in certain parts of this film. That it's not just a single. I know that it's never been that, especially when it's come to Rebels on Disney XD. It's never been portrayed as this single unifying thing. It's always these little pockets of resistance all across the galaxy.
Like there's the rebellion, and I think the Alliance to Restore the Republic. I think it's two separate things.
That's what it seemed like. Because
two separate things working together.
Because there were a collection of senators in a critical scene that, come down and are saying, we cannot afford to...
the council does not approve of this decision.
Basically. That's basically what it is. And then, of course, what happens is that Jyn Erso just goes... Jyn Erso goes all...
yeah, I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah. It just goes like, I recognize the council's made a decision.
Seeing as it's a stupid-ass decision, I've decided to ignore it.
How appropriate.
There is a flashback sequence, and how often do you get flashbacks in Star Wars?
That's another thing. That's another thing to point out too. It's just how different.
It's very different. I'll get to that in a moment.
We'll go ahead and get
there is a flashback sequence that appears to take place on Coruscant, another prequel location, even though the name Coruscant comes from Heir to the Empire in Legends, though Lucas had always wanted a capital planet that was like one big city, so sort of mixing together there,
right.
Best of both worlds. There is a planet which I believe is Mustafar, which is the location of Vader's castle. Yeah, that's another expanded or Legends element that they are bringing back. And people say, but it's not the Vader's castle that I grew up with.
There's no pleasing you people, is there?
Look, I miss Legends as well, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Because a franchise like this needs to evolve and reinvent itself sometimes. The fact that there's actually including stuff from Legends, I think shows the amount of respect that they actually have for Legends.
I agree. I think that it's always been, a big bone. I've had a bone to pick with so many people, especially like the Bring Back Legends folks, that just make themselves so obnoxious.
We don't want to start any comment wars or anything like that.
No,
I've done my share of that in a previous video. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I understand why people are upset that basically over 20 years of literature, comics, and just everything that we thought was real is just all of a sudden just deemed non-canon basically by the flip of a switch. And I understand that, but at the same time, it's like, when Disney took over, you had to know that if they were going to be starting fresh, you had to have known, at least in the back of your mind, that they weren't going to be beholden to everything that had been written or done prior. You had to have known that, even just at a base level, didn't you?
And then, people are just going to say, well, they should just continue it as an alternate universe thing. That's not exactly feasible when,
No, especially now with Pablo Hidalgo running the story group the way that he does. There's really no reason for Legends to continue.
Because you would need to have like two completely different story teams.
Exactly. And that's just not efficient. You're wasting resources in that way. Believe you me, I don't like that there are certain things that have gotten thrown out as much as the next guy. But at the same time, the constant amount of things that we've seen from the EU that have popped up in Star Wars Rebels.
Thrawn.
I mean, Thrawn probably the best example.
Thrawn being supervised by Timothy Zahn.
They also had a bit in not the most recent episode, but the episode prior, where they had the new model of the TIE Fighter that was taken straight from the old PC game.
Yes.
So I understand your frustration, but they're throwing you some rope here, and you're basically saying, "Nah, I'm just going to go ahead and drown."
Now, I'll say this about Legends and the new canon, and I've said this before in another video somewhere. That I loved Legends, but looking at Legends and looking at the new stuff, Legends had a different kind of flavor that didn't exactly gel perfectly with the films. Now, not to say that they weren't good, but there was a flavor that was a bit darker and grittier. But I look at the new stuff. I look at Rebels, I look at the comics, I look at these new films, and they scream Star Wars.
You could say that maybe the old EU, it feels like that it was more sci-fi than space fantasy. Whereas it feels like that we're kind of getting more space fantasy here, maybe with this new canon. I mean, maybe that's an oversimplification.
No, I mean, there's just, there was a dark grittiness to certain Legends material that, while good, didn't exactly have the same flavor as the films. Stuff like Dark Empire and and the Thrawn trilogy and all kinds of stuff. They had good stuff, but the flavor wasn't quite perfect.
No, it's hard to say.
It's hard to put it into words what I'm talking about.
It is.
I mean,
because you
had stuff in the old EU, like the Yuuzhan Vong, and it's just like, what is Star Warsy about these guys?
And the other thing that
it's like they're like from a completely different franchise.
From what you've told me about the Vong, yeah, it does feel that way. It feels as though that it's more, and of course, this is of course all completely subjective. Let's be completely
subjective.
Fair about this, because again, we're not trying to demonize the people who feel as though who felt a connection to the old EU, because we certainly have felt a connection to the old EU.
Absolutely, and there is certain material that I like to keep in my headcanon. Knights of the Old Republic, Darth Plagueis, that kind of stuff. As long as the new stuff doesn't contradict those, I can still imagine that those stuff, the pre-Return of the Jedi stuff, could have happened.
Yeah.
I just can't cite them as a legitimate source anymore.
At least not until we get more, material that details the now 30-year gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. But back to Rogue One.
Back to Rogue One. There were a lot of new stuff. That is just an email. There is a lot of new stuff introduced in this film that is new to Star Wars films. A couple things that stuck. The first obvious thing is no opening crawl.
No, you do get
a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but then it jumps right into a planet scene.
It feels like that it's almost like an episode of Rebels in that regard.
Yeah, kind of.
A bit. I'm not saying because that's what it does. Rebels has a cold open, and then you get the logo.
Whereas Clone Wars had a more verbal crawl.
Right. That was intentional, because it was meant to be like one of those old like newsreel footage.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So right down to Tom Kenny's narration.
No, Tom Kane.
Tom Kane. My mistake. Okay, same first name. You can forgive me for making a mistake.
But another first that I noticed for this film is in establishing shots for all these new planets or different locations, you actually get text on the screen telling you where this place is, the name of this world, blah, 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 blah. That is a first for Star Wars.
That is a first, because they've never had that before. I mean, they've always said, we're going to this planet, and then they show it.
Yeah.
But again, with some of the naming conventions that they take with it, this is probably as good a reason as any to probably say, hey, let's throw these names up here so that the audience doesn't get confused.
And that's fair, because there was initially confusion when the Force Awakens come out, whether they destroyed Coruscant.
Right.
But no, it was Hosnian Prime.
Right. And I don't know if the story that we heard that they had intended it to be Coruscant or not is true, but I'm
glad it wasn't, because that would have been a bit of a middle finger.
It would have been, yeah, and it's just but no, we've gone on about. I think that I will say that when you get it's a little. The movie itself is a little slow to start, but then again, most Star Wars movies are a little slow to start.
Not
necessarily.
Not the original trilogy.
Well, you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, people saw the original film for the first time and they thought it was too fast.
Fair point. But what I mean by that is that. But what I'm trying to get to here is that once it hits Act 2. it takes off from there, and it doesn't let up the rest of the way.
And especially Act 3.
Act 3.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's not. I hesitate to call it like the original Avengers level for Act 3, but this is pretty darn close. Because
especially for a Star Wars film.
Oh gosh, I don't think I've been this almost blown away by a final battle like this. At least not since since watching the original or just playing that, playing the games, playing the Star Wars like Rogue Squadron games or something like that.
We get a lot of familiar faces in
this. Yes, I think that's the important thing.
First foremost, with this film, I think people who continue to harp that CG has no place in Star Wars can suck it. Because with the place we are now with digital technology, they have managed to digitally resurrect Peter Cushing.
It was absolutely stunning
and
watching that for the first time.
This isn't like what they did with Orville Redenbacher, where there was this uncanny valley to him. This looked like fucking Peter Cushing.
There might be a little bit of uncanny valley for more discerning viewers, to be fair, and more there are some critics that I've heard reviews of Rogue One for say that maybe there's a little bit but even they're basically saying, you know what, we got to do something in order to get the technology perfected, and this is as good a place as any to start.
And it didn't stop with Peter Cushing.
No.
Do we dare spoil this?
You know what? I think we hold on to that because it's a magnificent coda at the end of the movie. Let's keep that in our back pockets. We said we're going to spoil things, but you know what? There are certain things that we'd like to let you guys see for yourselves.
We will say that they make perfect use of archive footage of Red Leader and Gold Leader.
Yes, that was a pleasant surprise and a little bit of an amusing scene with a certain
call sign,
with a certain call sign, if you will.
Basically, well, we got an opening.
And yes, it's supposed to be in this kind of serious battle, but at the same time, you know that Star Wars is not something that takes itself too seriously all the time.
Yeah.
So let's be fair about that.
Other cameos, we get a brief cameo by R2 and 3PO.
A very brief one. We also get a couple of familiar faces from a certain scene in the first movie.
Dr. Ivezan and Ponda Baba.
That was actually a little surprising to see them pop up.
Though, why aren't they on Tatooine? Considering the time frame of this movie.
At the same time, though, again, we ran into a few fans that were excited coming out of that. I'd be willing to bet that they were on their way out of that town to begin with. Considering their own words that we're wanted men.
We're wanted. No, it was you just watch yourself.
you know what I'm trying to say here.
What else?
For Rebels fans.
Oh yes.
For Rebels fans, I did not see it, but I know probably because we saw it on IMAX, so it was a pretty big screen that we saw.
This is in TV spots.
This is in TV spots.
You can glimpse the ghost from Star Wars Rebels.
And I swear to heaven, there was a scene where they are on the Rebel base, and there's a call that comes over the intercom, and I swear to heaven that I hear calling General Syndulla. I swear to heaven that's what it said. I could be wrong.
Personally, I heard General Dodonna. I'd have to watch the film again to verify.
Well, we're definitely going to go see this again.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about that.
But if it was Syndulla...
Well played, sirs. And unfortunately, we don't get a cut-in of the ghost during that final act, which would have been a nice little touch, but you know what?
I'm sure I saw a brief frontal view at one point, but it was down in the corner and it was very brief.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's good to see that those guys are even throwing, Rebels fans a bone. So...
Considering the time frame of this movie, they'd be crazy not to.
Too true. Too true. It was, and okay, there is one scene near the end that we can't hold back. We get probably one of the most brutal sequences
Oh.
with Darth Vader that has ever been committed to screen.
Well, the Rebels have the
Holy
plans, and they're trying to get it onto the Tantive 4, and they're rushing through a corridor, and the door stops before them. Vader emerges from the darkness with his saber, and they are just like pounding on the door, on the window, "Help us!" And then you can feel the terror as he's coming after them and handing them their asses, and I was just like, oh my god, this is brutal, this is perfect.
And I know that we always say, we're fond of saying that one thing that we dislike about that some Star Wars fans seem to hold up the dark moments of the franchise as being inherently better than everything else. This was, whoa. It's just like...
You cannot look at this scene and say, oh, this is Disney-fied.
No. Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. Oh, it was...
And I love the attention to detail on Vader. They actually gave him the red eye lenses that he had in the original film. Few people know this, but his eye lenses were actually red. But it was just so dark, this costume, that a lot of people think it's black. Just same with the Stormtroopers. The original Stormtroopers actually had green eye lenses. Can you believe that?
Another good thing that was in there is that you brought up the scene with him on at his castle. We get a brief shot of him in a Bacta tank.
And it's very fogged up. You can just make him out in that, and it was just a perfect introduction to him.
Which makes you have to wonder, why was he in the Bacta tank to begin with?
I'm sure he takes those regularly simply because of his injuries.
True. I mean, there's probably no doubt about that, but what if he was on a mission somewhere before then? We know, at least according to Rebels, that he's essentially an enforcer for Tarkin. So maybe something happened. I mean, I don't know. I'm just, I'm spitballing here with that. It's like, I mean, I brought the thought up, well, did he maybe have another run-in with a certain old friend?
Yeah, did she die or didn't she?
I mean,
we still don't quite know. That was so ambiguous.
It's so ambiguous, but at the same time, I mean, still, that ending to season 2 of Rebels. I mean, that was, woof.
Toddler show, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Anyone who wants to just continue to use the Disney-fied excuse, you're just. I mean, we get into these arguments with these people that want to try to grab on a DC, find anything that they possibly can that's good, and yet when it comes to Disney, it's just like they want to turn their backs even when there's good quality there. And I just find that just to be just completely head scratching. It's just like, you guys know there's something better. I mean, are you that desperate for something to work that you're willing?
They want to hate it. They want to hate it.
But I mean, it's like with some of the arguments that we got with after we did our video on Batman v Superman earlier this year. It's just like, do people not know quality when it's staring you right in the face?
Although, I will say, there's a recent YouTuber, Cinema Wins, who has a series of everything great about. He's basically a reversal of CinemaSins and everything wrong with that. He did a defense of everything great about Batman v Superman. I'm just like, I don't agree, but I'll give it to him.
There were some points I was willing to give him, and I'll be honest, after he did that, he brought up the Martha thing, and him explaining it out, it actually does make a little more sense, but it's a bit
of a stretch, but
it's a stretch, but at the same time, it's just my biggest problem, of course, again with Batman v Superman, has less to do with the acting, and it's got more to do with the storytelling and the direction by Zack Snyder.
Also recommended viewing from this guy is everything great about not just The Force Awakens, but
the
all 3 prequels.
He's got all 3 of them done. In fact, he put up the episode 3 just a couple of days ago. I mean, if you want a second look at maybe those movies, his videos aren't all that long. I mean, definitely you can blow through them in about an hour if you've got some spare time. So
not mandatory viewing. We're not going to be all just watch Red Letter Media kind of thing. Not just I mean, you can take it or leave it.
I mean, I mean, again, we've always said this. I think that it's frustrating because I've always been frustrated with Red Letter Media because I think at least at one point, Staklasa intended his, quote unquote review of episode 1 to be more comedic in nature than what it wound up being. But then there was, of course, this feeding frenzy from people online that were just so desperate for anything to hang their hats on to basically pin on George's mistakes that they were willing to take something from a guy who decided, portraying one of the most abhorrent characters in existence. It was somehow acceptable.
The thing with the Red Letter Media is just people are just treating it as gospel. Like, this is why they're bad, and you can't argue with it. Well, there are arguments for it.
There are. I mean, and again, I've often said that probably the one thing that I've had the biggest issue with is how some reviewers have basically tried to keep using, say, some of the Plinkett mannerisms in their videos. Look, I don't have any doubts about that because, let's be fair, for stuff that we do here on YouTube, that was something of an achievement. And in that regard, there's respect to be given, but that's as far as we can go because everything about those reviews, it just feels like that it's nothing more than just saying to the folks that grew up with the prequel trilogy, like myself, that you're stupid, and these movies are stupid. It's what it feels like.
I mean, you shouldn't treat fellow fans that way.
No, and
if they like a movie that you don't, fine. You can just accept that or discuss it with them. But you don't need to come down high and mighty with, you're wrong and this is why you're wrong. I mean, that's not fun in a fan base.
Can we have some civil conversations once again? Because it's especially growing hard now that we're a year out from, we're basically now a year, removed from the premiere of The Force Awakens. And, I went back and I watched our video about is a war brewing, back when
it was leading up to.
When it was leading up to it. And sure enough, it feels like that there's a war going on with not just, the prequel people, I feel like they, for the most part, I think they recognize that. I think that they have recognized, hey, we're kind of portraying ourselves in kind of a negative light. It feels like that they've kind of dialed it back, but the EU people and the original trilogy purists, they feel like that they've just been full steam ahead on these kinds of things, and that's unfortunate.
Most of the original trilogy people seem to love The Force Awakens, although I'm sure there is a large portion of original trilogy people that hate The Force Awakens.
I'm sure.
Like I said, Force Awakens has been a very divisive movie.
And I honestly think that we don't know how we're gonna look back on that. I think I even said it when we did our video of it earlier this year, or even late last year. We don't know what we're going to get from The Force Awakens until we see the other movies in the series.
Right. I mean, that's still a first installment of that trilogy.
The stories of these characters are not complete. Until these stories are complete, we can't really know where this is going to go.
But back to Rogue One. Let's talk about Forrest Whitaker's character.
Yes, Saw Gerrera, a character that
had previously appeared in the Clone Wars.
And something that I didn't know until you brought it up, had originally been a potential lead character for
the live action series that never got made.
Sadly, unfortunately.
Underworld, believe it was.
I think that's what I heard at one point, but it was just unfortunate that I always feel like that's unfortunate that series never got off the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, that could have been a good little move right there by George. He could have.
But I still have to wonder to this day, how do you do live action Star Wars on a TV budget?
Yeah.
Even today's TV budget, which is incredible.
I mean, that's why that's why I'm never going to criticize animation for Star Wars, because let's face it, I think animation is probably the best place for Star Wars if you want it on television.
You can do more with animation than you can do with live action.
Absolutely. But Saw Gerrera, I mean, again, he's this extremist who is trying to make sure that he's trying to beat back the empire, but he's taken things to such extremes that the rebellion almost wants nothing to do with it.
He tortures.
He tortures one of our main characters in here, an Imperial cargo pilot that wanted to defect, and unfortunately he didn't get the most gracious welcome.
He seems to be in some strong physical disarray. I mean, he's almost a beta Vader in some sense.
In some regards, right.
I mean, he's got a respirator that he occasionally has to breathe
He's got mechanical legs.
Yeah. Guy's been through a lot.
I mean, yeah, no two ways about it.
Though I have to wonder how, early in the film he's bald, and then in the present he's got a full head of hair.
Well, remember, the very beginning, that was, the very beginning of the movie was actually set at say 10, 15 years in the past.
Well, I get that, but that's, going from bald to full head, that's, I don't think I've seen that often.
It's just an interesting look.
Even if he is just shaving it back then.
True. Again, though, I think that the bottom line here for this. I mean, anything else that you want to? Anything else, perhaps?
Not that I can think off the top of my head.
Just overall, I think that it's just like. I mean, you guys were probably going to go see this movie regardless.
Or you have already. I mean, probably by the time this goes up, you've probably already gone to see it at least once at this juncture. But this was the kind of movie that I had always wondered about when I was growing up. I've often said that the period of time between Episode 3 and Episode 4 is the one period of time in Star Wars history in the Star Wars timeline, I should say, that I've had the most, curiosity about. And this movie was basically everything I could have hoped for in a movie that was basically, hey, let's go steal the Star Wars, the Death Star plans. It was a roller coaster. It was a trip. It was one heck of an experience, and I think this movie proves that the Star Wars spin-off films can definitely work. And if we're going to be getting these indefinitely after Episode 9, I welcome the possibilities.
Oh yeah, I think that you've got opportunities for these things to be very, very far-reaching in regards to certain things. Again, you not only have the 20-year gap between Episode 3 and Episode 4 to work with, you've also got the 30-year gap now between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens now in play. Surely that they've got to have some idea of what they want to do for a movie in that time frame. I mean, now it's just a matter of we're probably going to go see this, and then before too long, back on the hype train, getting ready for Episode 8.
Episode 8.
Yeah, I mean, you think that we're going to get exhausted from this anytime soon?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Look, I mean, when you have a 30-minute, when you're able to have a 30-minute digestible of Star Wars every single week, and then you go from that to one of these big movies every year, it's no different than, say, Marvel having their own cartoon shows, and then you get the big movies on screen.
Well, the Marvel animated universe and the cinematic universe are two completely different entities.
True, that's true. But at the same time, it's just like, again, you're talking about you get a taste of that, and then you go see the big one. So it's go see it if you haven't already, and if you have seen it, let's talk about it. Let's be nice and civil down in the comments. If you got any questions for us, don't hesitate to ask us.
So I guess until next time.
Until next time. Hopefully, it's not going to be as long of a hiatus for us next time.
May the Force be with you.